Story of Ice Queenpin, Episode 4 The Takeover. The warehouse hummed with tension, the air heavy with the promise of change. Jade, Ice Daniel, stood at the center, her blonde and red locks catching the faint light filtering through the cracked windows. Around her, her crew moved like clockwork, efficient, quiet, and ready. This wasn't just another operation. This was the beginning of a takeover. Ice's eyes scanned the room, landing on Ghost, her sniper and most trusted ally. He stood in the corner, his rifle disassembled on the table before him. His hands moved with precision, reassembling the weapon as if it were second nature. Ghost wasn't just her eyes in the sky. He was the one person Ice trusted with her life, a bond forged long before North Park became their battlefield. Ghost's origin. They'd met years ago, when Ice was still building her reputation and Ghost was a man running from his past. His real name was Marcus Grant, a former army marksman with a record as clean as his shot. But a botched mission overseas left him disillusioned and dishonorably discharged. He drifted into North Park, a ghost of himself, until he found himself in the middle of a turf war. Ice had been running point on a deal gone sideways, her crew pinned down by rival gunfire. It was Ghost who had climbed onto the roof of a nearby building and taken out the attackers with chilling precision. When the dust settled, Ice tracked him down, finding him in a rundown apartment with nothing but his rifle and a bottle of cheap whiskey. "You saved my crew," she'd said, standing in his doorway. "Why?" Ghost had shrugged, his voice flat. "Didn't like the odds." Ice saw something in him that day, a sharpness, a pain, and most importantly, potential. She offered him a place in her operation, and though he'd been reluctant at first, he eventually agreed. Over the years, their bond grew, built on mutual respect and an unspoken understanding. Ghost became her shadow, her protector, and her confidant. The plan. Back in the warehouse, Ghost set his rifle down and approached Ice. "You sure about this?" he asked, his deep voice steady but laced with concern. Ice nodded, her gaze unwavering. "This city's been fractured too long. Malik's scrambling, and the other crews are watching, waiting to see who's gonna come out on top. It's time we make our move." Ghost tilted his head, studying her. "And you think they'll fall in line?" "They will," Ice said firmly. "Because we're not giving them a choice." The plan was simple in theory but required flawless execution. Over the next 48 hours, Ice's crew would hit 3 key targets: Malik's last stash house, the docks controlled by a smaller rival crew, and a neutral zone where deals were brokered. By taking control of these locations, Ice would send a clear message: North Park belonged to her. The first strike. The first target was Malik's stash house, a dilapidated two-story building on the edge of North Park. Ghost took position on a nearby rooftop, his rifle trained on the building's entrance. Ice and Dre led the ground team, moving with practiced precision. 3 guards at the front, Ghost's voice crackled through Ice's earpiece. 2 more patrolling the alley. "Got it," Ice replied. She motioned to Dre, who nodded and signaled the team to split up. The operation was over in minutes. Ghost took out the lookouts, his shots silenced but deadly. Dre's team breached the front door, neutralizing the guards inside. By the time Ice walked in, the stash house was secured, and Malik's product was hers. The docks. The docks were a different challenge. Controlled by a small but scrappy crew called the Southside Hustlers, the area was heavily guarded. Ice knew this strike would test her crew's limits, but she also knew it was necessary. "We'll hit them at midnight," Ice said during the briefing. "Ghost, you'll cover the perimeter. Dre, you're leading the entry team. I'll handle the negotiations if anyone's still standing when we're done." The docks were chaos. The Southside Hustlers fought back harder than expected, but Ice's crew was relentless. Ghost's precision kept them one step ahead, and Dre's brute force cleared the way. By the end of the night, the docks were under Ice's control. The neutral zone. The final target was the neutral zone, a rundown warehouse where North Park's power players met to broker deals. Ice's approach here was different. Instead of a show of force, she walked in alone, her presence enough to silence the room. "This ends tonight," she said, her voice calm but commanding. Malik's done. The docks are mine. You've seen what my crew can do. Now, you have a choice: fall in line or fall apart. The room was silent as the other leaders exchanged glances. Finally, one of them, an older man named Rico, stood up. You've got guts, Ice, and you've got the muscle to back it up. I'm in. One by one, the others followed. By the time Ice walked out, North Park was hers. Reflection. Later that night, Ice and Ghost sat on the roof of the warehouse overlooking the city. The air was cool, the chaos of the day finally giving way to quiet. We did it, Ice said, her voice softer than usual. Ghost nodded, his gaze fixed on the skyline. For now. Ice glanced at him. You always gotta be so practical. He smirked. Keeps us alive. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their victory settling in. Finally, Ice spoke. Thanks for having my back. Always. Ghost turned to her, his expression serious. Always, Jade. As the city slept, Ice's phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at the screen, her brow furrowing. The text was from an unknown number. Enjoy your crown, Queenpin, but heavy is the head that wears it. Ice's jaw tightened. The takeover was complete, but the war for North Park was far from over. Episode 5: Hearts on Fire. Jade Ice Daniels had built walls around her heart as tall and unyielding as the empire she commanded. But walls, no matter how strong, had cracks. And sometimes those cracks let in more than the cold. Crossroads of the heart. It was early evening when Jade found herself in a quiet corner of North Park, sitting on the hood of her sleek black SUV. The streetlights cast a soft glow, and the air was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt. She just wrapped up a meeting with her crew, the details of their next move etched into her mind. But tonight, her thoughts wandered to Elijah Eli Johnson. Eli had been a steady presence in her life since their paths first crossed months ago. He was sharp, resourceful, and had a way of reading her that no one else did. But it wasn't just his loyalty or skill that lingered in her thoughts. It was the way he looked at her, like he saw beyond the Queenpin to the woman beneath. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her reverie. It was Eli. Busy, she smirked, typing back. Always? Why? His reply was instant. Let me steal a minute. A quiet moment. They met at Hustle and Grind, the same rundown cafe where so many of their conversations began. The flickering neon sign buzzed faintly as Jade slid into the booth across from Eli. He was already nursing a coffee, his usual calm demeanor intact. You really know how to interrupt a schedule, she said, her tone teasing but edged with curiosity. Eli leaned back, a faint smile playing on his lips. And you really know how to make time for things that matter. Jade raised an eyebrow. That what this is? Something that matters? His smile widened, but he didn't answer directly. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice dropping low. I know you've got the city on lock, Ice, but when's the last time you let someone watch your back? Her expression hardened slightly. I've got Ghost, I've got Dre, I've got an army if I need it. Eli nodded, his gaze steady. Yeah, but that's business. I'm talking about you. When's the last time someone saw you, not the Queenpin but Jade? For a moment, she didn't answer. The walls she'd built around herself felt heavier in his presence, but she couldn't deny the truth in his words. She changed the subject. You didn't call me here for a therapy session. What's on your mind? Eli sighed, knowing better than to push further. Malik's crew's been quiet. Too quiet. Word is, they're planning something big. I've got a lead on one of his lieutenants. Thought you'd want to handle it personally. Jade's smirk returned. You know me too well. Love in the crossfire. The lead took them to an abandoned building on the edge of South Side. It was late, the city cloaked in shadows as Jade and Eli approached the location. Ghost was stationed nearby, providing overwatch, while Dre waited in the getaway car. Jade moved with her usual precision, her leather jacket hugging her frame as she slipped through the darkened halls. Eli followed close behind, his quiet presence a steadying force. They found the lieutenant in a makeshift office, poring over maps and notes. The confrontation was swift. Jade's gun was drawn before the man could reach for his, her ice blue eyes locking onto him with deadly intent. Talk, she demanded. What's Malik planning? The lieutenant stammered, his bravado crumbling under her gaze. A shipment. Docks. Midnight tomorrow. That's all I know, I swear. Jade didn't flinch. If you're lying, I'll find you. As they left the building, the tension between her and Eli was palpable. Back outside, Ghost's voice crackled through the comms. All clear. Eli turned to Jade as they reached the car. You didn't have to handle that yourself and let someone else send the message? She replied, sliding into the passenger seat. But as the car sped off, her mind lingered on Eli's words. She'd spent so long building her empire, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. Almost. Confessions under the stars. Later that night, Jade found herself on the rooftop of the warehouse, the city lights stretching out before her. She wasn't surprised when Eli joined her, his footsteps soft against the concrete. You ever stop? He asked, leaning against the ledge beside her. She smirked, shaking her head. Stopping gets you killed. Eli's gaze was steady. And living? What does that get you? Jade turned to him, her expression softening for the first time that night. Haven't figured that out yet. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their lives pressing down like the air before a storm. Finally, Eli broke the quiet. I don't want to be just another piece on your board, Ice. I want to stand next to you, not behind you. Her heart skipped a beat, but she kept her face neutral. That's a dangerous thing to want. So is loving you, he replied, his voice low but steady. Jade didn't respond, but the look in her eyes said enough. For the first time in a long time, she let the walls crack just a little. And for the first time, she wondered if letting someone in wasn't a weakness, but a strength. The moment was interrupted by the buzz of her phone. She glanced at the screen, her expression hardening. What is it? Eli asked. Ghost, she said, her voice clipped. He's got eyes on the docks. Malik's making his move early. Eli nodded, his expression shifting to match hers. Then let's handle it. As they headed back inside, Jade couldn't shake the feeling that her two worlds, love and the streets, were about to collide in ways she wasn't ready for. But ready or not, she was Jade Ice Daniels, and she never backed down. Episode 6, Beneath the Surface. The air in North Park was thick with anticipation. Rumors of Malik's next move swirled through the streets like smoke, infiltrating every corner and alley. Jade Ice Daniels sat at the head of the table in her loft-turned war room, her ice blue eyes scanning the faces of her crew. The tension was palpable, a storm building just beneath the surface. The gathering storm. We've confirmed the shipment's real, Ghost said, his voice low and measured. The room fell silent as he continued. Malik's moving through the docks tonight. Heavy security. This isn't just product, it's weapons. Enough to arm every crew in the city. Dre, ever the enforcer, leaned forward. If Malik's stocking up, he's gearing for war. Ice didn't flinch. She never did. Then we hit him first, she said, her tone cold and commanding. We take the shipment, cut his supply line, and send a message. North Park's not up for grabs. Eli Johnson, seated to her right, nodded. Ghost's intel checks out. But this isn't just a smash and grab. Malik's expecting us. We need precision. Ice's gaze shifted to him, her expression softening slightly. That's why you're here, Eli. I need eyes and strategy. We're not walking into a trap. Ghost tapped the map spread across the table. We've got options. Sniper coverage from the east. Dre's team takes the south entrance, and Eli runs point with Ice on the docks. Ice stood, her leather jacket glinting in the dim light. We move at midnight. Everyone knows their role. No mistakes. The setup. The docks were alive with activity when Ice's crew arrived. Shipping containers loomed like giants in the fog, their shadows stretching across the water. The distant hum of engines and the clinking of chains created an eerie soundtrack to the night. Ghost's voice crackled through the comms. 12 guards visible, 2 on the north gate, 3 patrolling the perimeter. The rest are clustered near the shipment. Copy that, Ice replied, her voice steady. Dre, move in on my signal. Eli, stay close. Eli fell into step beside her as they made their way through the maze of containers. His presence was a comfort she wouldn't admit out loud. "You good?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Always," she replied, her ice blue eyes scanning the shadows. As they approached the central area, the first shots rang out. Ghost had taken out the north gate guards, clearing the way for Dre's team to move in. Chaos erupted as Malik's crew scrambled to respond. The ambush. Ice and Eli reached the shipment, a series of crates loaded onto a flatbed truck. But something felt off. The guards weren't just disorganized, they were retreating. "Ghost, what's the play?" Ice asked, her instincts screaming. "Hold up," Ghost replied, his tone tense. "Movement on the west side. Looks like backup." Heavy hitters. Before Ice could respond, a series of floodlights lit up the area, blinding her crew. Malik himself stepped out from the shadows, flanked by armed men. His smirk was as wide as the chaos he thrived in. "You really thought you'd catch me slippin'," Malik sneered. "You're bold, Ice, I'll give you that. But this is suicide." Dre and his team regrouped, their weapons drawn, but Ice held up a hand. "Malik," she said, her voice calm despite the tension. "You've been making moves like you own this city. Let me remind you, North Park's mine." Malik laughed, the sound echoing through the docks. "We'll see about that." The standoff was broken by a sudden explosion from the east. Ghost's distraction worked, throwing Malik's men into disarray. Ice seized the moment, firing at the guards nearest the truck. The aftermath. When the dust settled, Malik was gone, his men scattered. The shipment was secured, but the cost was high. Dre's team had taken hits, and the docks were now a war zone. Ice stood by the truck, her chest heaving as she surveyed the scene. Eli approached, his face grim. "This isn't over, it never is," she replied, her voice softer than usual. A fragile moment. Back at the loft, the crew regrouped. Ghost patched up Dre's wounds while Ice and Eli stood on the rooftop, the city stretching out before them. "Tonight was close," Eli said, his tone serious. "Too close." Ice nodded, her ice blue eyes reflecting the city lights. "We'll hit harder next time." Eli turned to her, his gaze searching. "You keep saying that, but when does it stop? When do you win?" She met his eyes, her walls cracking ever so slightly. "Winning's not an option. Surviving is." Ice nodded, her ice blue eyes reflecting the city lights. "We'll hit harder next time." Eli turned to her, his gaze searching. "You keep saying that, but when does it stop? When do you win?" She met his eyes, her walls cracking ever so slightly. "Winning's not an option. Surviving is." Eli stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Then let me help you survive, Jade." "Not just out there, but here," he said, placing a hand over her heart. For a moment, she let herself feel the weight of his words. But the moment was fleeting. "We'll see," she said, her voice barely audible. As the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, Ice's phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at the screen, her expression hardening. "The game's not over, Queenpin. It's just beginning." She slid the phone back into her pocket, her ice blue eyes narrowing. The war for North Park was far from over, and Jade Ice Daniels was ready for whatever came next. The end. To be continued.